when I did that little study, our people are always studying and learning, going and finding here and there, but they never get recognized for what they do, like for their work, and this way they can, and that's really valuable. So there's you have to think about finding examples of other ways of being in the world. Okay, and so the Indigenous world is a good example. You also have to think about what has been constructed and is being held up, from the colonial world, and then the third is like of just how in the history of universities, because I think then that way you'll be able to see the traditions of grading and that need to be addressed. So, for example, because universities were new, like in moving into construct a place for itself, they needed to create a little island of their own, and so how did they then create it so that only a certain set of people? So and then in the colonial world, creating themselves to be a country, they denied all other languages and knowledge systems. And that's, the people who came over here were not the older ones, it was the younger, who would never get anywhere, because of the stratification system, that notion of stratification, and that's what got established in the institutions, to the point where people don't even realize that that's what they're living and that's what they're promoting. So why is it today, that the people who get chosen for jobs still are fair, male, young?
Yeah, because I think that's what we're lacking, is other examples, right, of what is possible. Vision, our view of how assessment could go differently by using portfolios as ways to capture evidence that isn't just text-based, that isn't just written down, but there's multiple ways of showing that that you know things, so that you can do things, so that you have understandings of things, because people just don't see that there's another way. Live in the world, and the way they communicate with each other, and the sophistication of all of those kinds of things. It has nothing to do with writing a test or writing an essay. And you realize that there needs to be other ways to share what it is we know.
Yeah.
I think the Lillywhite terms, when you came up with those, they interact with each other, a different way of doing assessment, right? Because the QUILIP is take risks, right? You've got to be outside your comfort zone, right? Curricula, you've got to be connected, and the felt energy of group attunement, so you're not doing it just for yourself. They all get at why assessment can't be, I get a high number and you get a low number, and that's okay. Right? It has to be something different. Speaking to those terms, how you see Indigenous assessment as coming out of those? How do they emerge? How does it emerge?
When I thought about teaching and learning, so that's where I began with those. And I looked at the Lillywhite world, and I looked at how, because teaching and learning was something that was really important and significant in our world, in order to be able to to live in the world and to know how to go about things. You need to know how to learn. You need to know how to know. And so how did the people go about ensuring that that young people were learning and developing, and it's a process that began really at a very, very young age, and observation by multiple perspectives in the community was really a key part of it. So it wasn't just like one person saying, "Oh, the thing is that the one who has to know that they've achieved and that they've done something is the person themselves." So I was thinking, how did the community go about doing that then? Because it was done in such a non-invasive and kind of like silent way, like nobody ever cheered when somebody got something. And so I was thinking about that, and I started to think about how it worked, and the first one that I came up with was khilkhil, because it was something that I noticed when people were in the community and doing collective work. The old people took note of and observed was when a young person was khilkhil, and what that meant was when a young person would come in, they would look and assess to see what needed to be done, and then fit themselves into the whole work team. So it's the ability to be aware of the lay of the land, what's going on, and to know enough about yourself to know where you're going, where you can be a part and fit yourself in. So it's having that ability, to assess what's going on, to make an assessment, and also having the ability to know yourself enough to know then where you can bring your skills. It's a level of self-knowledge that's really important, and that the old people are watching that, and so that and they're just making kind of like a recording in their minds, because if they notice the way a young person is behaving, if they're not fitting themselves into the group, then somebody will just kind of quietly do something about it, help to direct, or what they'll do is tell a funny story about, so that the person themselves who has to assess where they are and what they need to do.
Right.
Awareness of that importance of connection.
Yes.
And making, and then figuring out, how to be able to achieve that. And so that's why when we come together, I always say that there is that they mold whatever is in the center. And so it's no longer, mine or yours, it's everybody's, because it's
Right.
there.
Yeah.
So much of what we've done out here with assessment is that somebody out there is doing the assessment. Very little of it, which is what you're trying to do with your contract, has to do with self-awareness and self-assessment. Just kind of, and that's so important. That's the self-knowledge is so important. The big difference is in the world out here, we think we create these descriptions and of what we think are competencies, and then everybody has to reach that. In our world, because we're community structured, then everybody thinks that we all have to be the same. But for us, the real strength and the beauty of community is difference. And that's the big challenge with being able to describe a competency, because when you describe the competency, it's sameness from their own, and that's the gift, the difference. Right. And so it's if everybody was, did the same thing or was the same, then, life just couldn't make it. It really requires uniqueness and the gifts, and that's, there were things that you needed to function. So, for example, that's why I always use the example of my name, my nature, and because of my experiences as a child, I was really quick to anger and really fiery. And so when you're, that's okay. And sometimes they gave me my name for me to learn how to manage, and what the translation of it is, walking in peace among people, and figure out what that meant. And so the way that they helped me to figure that out was to tell me stories about people who held that name. The teaching in our world then is also a really important aspect of it, is that it's really indirect. It's always constructed so that you're not directly told. You're the one who has to draw it out. And they'll keep working at it until you get it, until you figure it out. And that's what they're watching for.